Before the Great Pyramid at Giza became the symbol of ancient Egypt, there was an earlier moment, quiet, experimental, and decisive, when Egypt first learned to build eternity in stone. It happened at Saqqara, and the most important fact is simple. The step pyramid was not planned as a pyramid. It began as something older, something familiar. Then it changed, and changed again, until the result was a royal monument the world had never seen. In this story, we will follow 5 clear steps. First, why Saqqara mattered. Second, how the design evolved from a mastaba into a stepped mountain. Third, the strange truth that the pyramid is only the center of a much larger ritual city. Fourth, the underground labyrinth where the most surprising evidence hides. And finally, why Saqqara is the missing link that makes Giza make sense. Now, begin with the landscape. Saqqara sits on a limestone plateau above the Nile Valley. Below, the floodplain is green and alive. Above, the desert is dry, permanent, and silent. For the Egyptians, this separation mattered. The living belonged to the river. The dead belonged to the edge of cultivation, where land stopped being useful and started being symbolic. In the earliest dynasties, kings were buried in mastabas, low rectangular tombs with sloping sides. They were impressive, but they belonged to a world still built in mud brick, a world where architecture, however sacred, eventually returned to dust. Then came King Dahshur, early 3rd dynasty. Egypt was more unified now. Administration was stronger. Labor could be organized on a larger scale, and beside Dahshur stood a name that later generations would treat like a legend, Imhotep. Whether Imhotep was the single mastermind or the most famous figure in a larger machine, his association with Saqqara tells you how Egyptians remembered this moment. They believed it marked a leap, not just in size, but in intelligence. A shift from building tombs to building systems, because what Dahshur built at Saqqara is not simply a tomb. It is a controlled world, and at its center is the structure we call the step pyramid. But again, it did not begin that way. Archaeological evidence suggests the first plan was a stone mastaba, already unusual because stone on this scale was not the standard royal material. Mud brick was faster, cheaper, familiar. Stone was heavy, demanding, and slow. Stone required organization. So the first statement at Saqqara was not, build a pyramid. The first statement was, build the king's tomb as if time itself were the enemy. And then the second statement came, and the third, because the structure was enlarged, extended, raised, reconfigured. It is as though the project kept outgrowing itself, as though the king's monument had to match a growing confidence in the state. What emerges is 6 steps, rising to roughly 60 meters, forming a monumental staircase of stone. It does not have the smooth casing of Giza. It shows its layers openly, like an idea still visible in its own construction. And that is one reason it holds attention even today. It feels like invention you can still see. But the true surprise is this. If you only look at the step pyramid, you are missing most of Saqqara. Because Dahshur did not build one monument, he built a whole precinct around it, an enclosed sacred city designed for ritual movement, royal renewal, and controlled access. A high limestone wall surrounds the complex. At a glance, it resembles fortification, but it is not built for war. It is built for separation. It marks the line where ordinary space ends and sacred space begins. And once you pass through the entrance, Saqqara becomes a sequence. A corridor draws you inward. Columns appear, stone columns carved to imitate bundled reeds, as if the builders were translating an older world into a new material. You step into courtyards, wide and exposed to the sky. You move past chapels and symbolic buildings, some functional, some ceremonial, some made to be seen more than used. This matters because it reveals the purpose. The complex was not just built to house a body, it was built to sustain kingship. In Egypt, a king did not simply rule, die, and disappear. The king became a different kind of presence, a force that needed offerings, rituals, and correct architecture in order to remain effective in the cosmic order. And in the architecture of Saqqara, you can sense that the designers were not only thinking about burial, they were thinking about performance. There are open courts that scholars often associate with royal ceremonies, including the Sed festival, the Jubilee ritual meant to renew the king's strength and legitimacy. In life, such festivals reaffirmed power. In death, the architecture suggests that renewal could be symbolically continued, as though kingship itself should never decay. So, above ground, Saqqara is a ritual landscape, but beneath it lies the part that surprises even people who think they already know pyramids. Because under the step pyramid is not a single chamber, it is a labyrinth, a vast network of tunnels and rooms cut into bedrock, complex enough to feel like an underground palace. Corridors branch into galleries, chambers multiply. Storage spaces extend in multiple directions, as if the tomb were built to contain not only a body and treasure, but an entire invisible infrastructure. And then comes one of the most memorable details in all early Egyptian archaeology. Some underground rooms were lined with blue faience tiles, small glazed pieces arranged to resemble reed matting, blue like water, blue like the sky, blue like divine space. Why build beauty underground? Because for the Egyptians, the tomb was not only a hiding place, it was a residence, a symbolic palace, a controlled environment for the king's second existence, and at the same time, the labyrinth serves another purpose: security. Complexity confuses intruders, depth slows them, sealed passages and hidden routes turn architecture into defense. So Saqqara is doing two things at once. It is building a world for the dead king to live in, and it is building a problem for the living to solve if they try to steal from him. Now, if you are watching this carefully, a new question forms naturally. How could they do this so early? How could Egypt build something like this at the beginning of the Pyramid Age, before the famous masterpieces? The answer is not mysterious technology. The answer is systems. Stoneworking was possible with the tools of the time, especially in limestone: copper chisels, stone hammers, drilling and abrasion methods, and hard labor repeated thousands of times. Harder stones required more time and different techniques, but nothing here requires an impossible lost science. What it requires is organization. To build Saqqara, you need quarry operations, you need transport, you need skilled masons, you need planners, you need foremen, you need scribes tracking rations, schedules, and deliveries. You need food supply chains feeding large crews for years. In other words, a pyramid is not simply stone. A pyramid is administration made visible. This is why Saqqara is so important historically, because it proves that by Djoser's time, Egypt was not just a kingdom with a divine king. It was a state with the capacity to concentrate labor and resources on a single sacred project at astonishing scale. And this leads directly to a myth that must be handled calmly. Many people assume pyramid construction was built purely by slaves. The evidence from later pyramid sites, worker settlements, ration records, organized crew structures strongly suggests a system that included skilled laborers and state-supported workers, including seasonal labor during times when farming paused during inundation. Saqqara's evidence is not identical in every detail to later sites, but the larger pattern across the pyramid building tradition supports a workforce that was fed, managed, and organized, not simply chained. And that matters, because it tells you the pyramids are not only stories of force, they are stories of coordination. Now we reach the crucial point. Why does Saqqara matter if Giza exists? Because Saqqara is the place where Egypt learned the pyramid idea. Giza is refinement. Saqqara is the leap. At Saqqara, Egypt learns how to build monumental scale in stone, how to control a ritual precinct, how to integrate above-ground symbolism with underground engineering, how to make kingship permanent in the landscape. And once Egypt has learned these lessons, it never unlearns them. Instead, it experiments. The next stages appear at Dahshur, where engineers test angles and casing. The bent pyramid shows adaptation mid-construction, geometry responding to reality. The red pyramid offers a more stable solution, and then Giza arrives with smooth casing, huge scale, and refined planning. But the first true step is Saqqara. And that is not metaphor. It is literal. A stepped mountain, a royal horizon, a civilization's confidence turning into limestone. Now pause and let the viewer feel the human dimension. Imagine arriving at Saqqara during construction. You would see blocks hauled across the plateau, ropes taut, sledges sliding, teams pulling in rhythm, foremen calling pace, dust rising, tools striking stone in steady repetition, scribes recording deliveries, work crews moving like a machine powered by food, organization, and belief. And rising above it all, the structure changing shape. First a mastaba, then enlarged, then lifted again, then stepped higher, until it became a monument you could see from far beyond the desert edge. If you lived in the Nile Valley and you saw that form growing year after year, you would understand the message without anyone speaking. The king is not like ordinary men. The king's house will not collapse. The king's memory will be built into the land. This is why pyramids were effective. They were not only religious, they were persuasive. They made authority physical. And Saqqara was the first time Egypt achieved that persuasion in full stone scale. So when you look at the Great Pyramid at Giza, do not start with the question, how did they build it? Start with a deeper question. How did they become the kind of society that could build it? Because that is the real mystery. Not the lever, not the ramp, not the tool. The real mystery is the human system capable of sustaining a project that outlives everyone involved. And Saqqara is the first clear answer. The step pyramid of Saqqara is not merely a monument before Giza. It is the beginning of the pyramid age. It begins as a mastaba, then refuses to remain one. It becomes steps, then becomes a precinct, a ritual city, a controlled sacred machine. It reaches underground into a labyrinth, blue-tiled, symbolic, defensive. And it leaves behind a lesson that every later pyramid repeats. Stone can be used to fight time. And when a state learns how to do that, it changes what power looks like. Next, we go to Dahshur, the place where the pyramid idea is tested under pressure, where geometry bends, and where Egypt learns what works before it attempts the perfection of Giza.